Hi everybody. Sorry that Ravi Shankar is not here because he had a minor accident and then he's not able to join the conference. But I'll be replacing his talk with something different. Although I'm not that familiar with USSD and it's too old for me. For me, something that's interesting is like IMSI catchers and stingrays. So I'll be talking about that, like all the work we have done in the last 6 years and then what has come up, something new in LTE, and also maybe something that's interesting in 5G, or what are the attacks that can happen in 5G and what are the mitigations and all this stuff. So I'm actually I'm doing my PhD in TU Berlin, and Ravi Shankar is in Norway. So we work together. Most of the time we are doing like cellular security research, but since we are onto the moving quickly to the 5G and LTE, so we are mostly focusing our work on LTE, and also we do a lot of protocol analysis, which is something really essential on the research point of view than doing implementation bugs or something like this. This is also interesting, but there are some limitations like regarding finding implementation bugs, which is something different when it comes to IP world. We also do like secure network building, like helping different organizations trying to build secure LTE networks. Also, what kind of mitigations they could use for building a strong 5G network, because a new network doesn't mean that, or a new technology doesn't mean that it's solving all your previous problems, and then maybe there's a nice technique to hide the previous problems and then just market it like, wow, this is a new technology, and then we are in a safe world. So this talk, I just give a recap of what telco attacks look like, what kind of attacks usually your phones or the base stations or the cellular networks can experience. Then I talk about like two main important aspects of cellular networks. The first is like privacy, and the second is availability, so which is nothing but availability of a service in terms of LTE users or in terms of LTE networks. So, and then some setup or all this stuff we used to perform so many attacks. And then, so what's the basic problem? Like some people keep asking me like, okay, we know that IMSI catches exist in 2G and we are now going to 5G and this problem hasn't been solved yet. So what's the reason? Like why? Why is this still prevailing? And then there are so many strong minds in the world and that are not able to solve this kind of problem. So what are the reasons for that? And the kind of impact or status that we have brought into 3GPP so that many of the privacy and availability issues could be fixed. And then I give a little bit insight into 5G and see, leave it where like you can, what kind of research directions that could be open or for more research if you're interested. Before going into the thing, like some basic knowledge about mobile networks, like it's quite simple. You have the phone, you have the base station, which are talking over the air. The base station is connected to a core network, which is nothing but a kind of a central server, which is managing authentication and encryption of all your subscriptions. So whenever you insert a SIM card, it's talking to the base station, and the base station reports back to the core network. It would send all your details of your SIM card, and the core network, like this, performs the authentication of your SIM card, if it's a legitimate one or if it's a fake one. Based on that, then comes the point of security, where over there encryption is set up between the phone and the base station. There could be also a security level between the core network and the UE. UE is nothing but a phone. So sometimes like I get used to this terminology, like kind of technical terminology, which is defined in the specification. So UE is nothing but a phone. eNodeB is nothing but a technical term for base station. So I interchangeably use them. So moving to telco attacks, like this is a simple flow diagram of all your mobile communication. So whatever data you're sending from here, it goes to base station, to the core network, and to the internet. So the first attack, the most popular one, is IMSI catchers. IMSI catchers, also called as stingrays. So these are some of the popular, like powerful devices that are being used by governments or state agencies, or even a lot of hackers and a lot of criminals to actually track users or to intercept communications, to create denial of service attacks, or you could do a lot when you own one such device. So the thing is, like with this, the attacker has to be in a local region. Like these are not remote attacks, so the power of this attack would be like the range that the base station is actually covering up. So all the phones that are falling under the range of this base station or this IMSI catcher are really affected, and it depends on like what kind of attacks these IMSI catchers are playing. So basically, like in the beginning, like the term IMSI catchers was like, okay, IMSI is nothing but it's the permanent identity of your SIM card. So every unique or every SIM card in this room has a unique number called IMSI. It's international mobile subscriber identity. So if I own this identity, it means that I can really identify you wherever your SIM card is going. Later, like when they try to increase the power of these devices, like they try to add interception capabilities where they can secretly listen voice, do a lot of denial of service attacks, either be it on the phone or on the network. I'll show you some denial of service attacks and some privacy related attacks like in the next slides. Then the second type of attack is like man in the middle. So there is somebody sitting in between the phone and the base station and trying to decode at least some kind of channels. Let's say, for example, broadcast channels are usually unencrypted. So it's quite easy to get access to such information. For example, like if somebody is having a kind of passive device that can actually read the broadcast channels or the frequencies of a mobile network operator, can actually decode some meaningful information about the operator and try to use it to actually establish an IMSI catcher device, which we saw before. Third one is interception, like a passive attacker. So these attacks are difficult to detect because like there is no noise being made by this attacker. On LTE, like doing a passive interception attack of voice is something not really possible yet, but maybe somebody can try. On GSM, it was quite successful because GSM didn't have any proper security. So people were actually able to passively listen into voice calls and try to play them back. So GSM was kind of something completely broken down in terms of security. The popular one, SS7, most of them are crazy about. But the thing is like, you need to get an SS7 access or find the endpoint that's actually answering all your SS7 queries. These attacks actually originate from the internet. They do not sit at the air interface. So they are like remote attacks and can be performed from any part of the world. So somebody having an access to a Jamaican operator and has a shady connection to so many parts of the world can actually request the operator to send your location in terms like which tower you're connected to and exactly like some kind of what are the GPS coordinates of a particular phone which is far away or like in a different continent. So these attacks are really powerful. Not only this location tracking attacks, also all the SMS or calls can be diverted to a different phone number. So these are really powerful attacks and hard to do unless you have an SS7 access. Some denial of service attacks, like where you have like SIM flood attacks, simply. Where you have like so many malicious phones that are trying to attack a base station, and then so that you keep the network busy and not trying to answer the legitimate requests from so many phones. So these are some typical attacks that actually happen in mobile networks. So last 5-6 years, we try to play with a lot of IMSI catchers, a lot of Stingray devices, and we try to build some of them and see what kind of attacks are really possible on LTE. Because like when LTE was introduced in 2009, there were a lot of requirements like, okay, there should be proper security compared to 2G or 3G, and there should be the privacy levels or expectations were really high. But we wanted to test it out, like, does this really possible on LTE? Because like we know that it's possible to operate a base station. And then we wanted to test it out. So we first targeted like, what is privacy? And always the phone is kind of a favorite target because like everybody owns one. And this could be something that's easily attackable and see what happens on that. But now with 5G, even the cars or small IoT devices are really, or your home devices can actually be controlled by mobile network. So now not only phones, even small low power devices like narrowband IoT are are actually vulnerable to so many attacks that happened on 4G and 5G. So when I talk about privacy, so we are actually talking about three different things. The first one is trying to compromise somebody's identity. The second is like trying to get the location. The third is like how do you hijack DNS on or like hijack or do a man-in-the-middle DNS attack on somebody that's using an LTE data traffic. We know that these attacks are possible on 2G, but we wanted to try them out on 4G and see like are they really possible. But since this is a retro talk, so all this work dates back to 2015, 2014. So, okay, the first bug we found was on so many LTE phones. Like by standard, like the phone should not reveal its IMEI. IMEI is something unique to your phone. So once somebody that's leaking IMEI on the air interface, it's possible to identify a particular person at a particular time in a particular location. So we gathered so many LTE phones that time. I think it was around S6 or S7 or Galaxy S5 or even iPhone 5, iPhone 6. We started playing these devices. So we tried to send a special message that's called, a special message called TAU reject, which is nothing but a tracking area update reject that actually deletes certain kind of security context in the phone. So by doing this, the phone is like completely refreshed now. So it's in the state like you insert a brand new SIM card, which doesn't have any kind of security context in the phone, which can actually protect the phone from sending the IMEI to rogue devices. So for a network, it's fine to actually for a legitimate network, it's completely fine to know your IMEI because it's required. For example, in the States, like where you don't have a SIM card, they do the authentication based on your IMEI. But here, like in Europe and Asia, we usually use SIM cards. So we have other identity called IMSI, which we actually use to do the authentication. So we found a bug and it was affecting most of the vendors. Like, okay, hardly if you count, there could be maybe 5 or 6 different baseband vendors who are actually manufacturing this mobile chipsets. For example, like Qualcomm, Intel, Huawei, or MediaTek. So there are a few manufacturers, and then we tried to report this bug to them so that they could fix it. I think it took maybe 5 or 6 years to actually fix this kind of bug. So at least, okay, I'll tell about like the bug fixes and everything maybe after some time. So this is the first one, like which actually affects the privacy of LTE subscribers. Moving on, like I showed, like there are different identities that are used by the phone. We know that IMSI is something related to SIM, IMEI is related to phone, and there is other identity called TIMSI. Okay, we can also call it like GUTI. It's nothing but a temporary identity that could be used in place of your permanent identities. So something like whenever your phone is trying to connect to the network, it would obviously send its temporary identity, and this was actually assigned by the network. So this could be used to hide your identity whenever you're sending your data over the network. In case a phone is not having a temporary identity, it could also send its IMSI. But this rarely happens, and it should not happen because like there's no point of using your permanent identities. It's like sending your public like private key to somebody. So it's like that. So we found like so many issues with operators. Like we tried different networks because like I said, this identity is something that's being assigned by the network operator to the phone. At different points, like whenever you turn on your phone and you turn it on again, it's common that your phone receives a new identifier, a new temporary identifier. We tried like repeating this experiment on different networks, like here. So I tried to attach my phone, register it. I get the first temporary identity. After maybe 5 minutes, I repeat, I turn it off, and then I turn on again. It registers, and then it gets a new identity. So the thing here is like, I think this is something from Germany, and this is something from Finland. So we see that the operators assign you a temporary identity, actually this should be a random number. But we see some kind of uniformity in this random number. So where only the central digit is only changing, but the rest of the digits keep on the same. So, which is not really nice in terms of hiding somebody's identity over the air. So this actually allows to track a particular person's location in a particular place. For example, like, if I'm passively looking at the network or like passively sniffing the network, if I see this identity today, and if I observe the same kind of identity tomorrow, it means that this person is still wandering in this location or somehow present in this location. So it's kind of leaking your host location, but not really precise. So we wanted to go more precise, like, okay, by using this, can we get more precise location of the user and compromise more privacy? So then we went on with something like measurement reports. So these are nothing but, okay, let's take a simple case where when you're traveling, your phone is switching from one base station to the other. So and this happens on the fly. Like you don't really notice that there's some kind of disturbance in between unless you have a poor connection. So as you're traveling, your phone keeps sending something called measurement reports to the network. So this contains actually the information of all the signal strengths from the nearby cells and their identities. So this is like a huge report with so much of information that's actually telling precise location of your phone. And once this report is received by the network, it verifies that, okay, so you're actually going close to this tower. So maybe I can hand over you to that particular tower. And then your call will be shifted, and then that's how it goes on. According to the standard, the 3GPP, like the standards body which is responsible for making the standards, like RFC, for example, like for the internet, they have made in the standards that this kind of reports can actually be sent by the phone, even without any authentication or security. So we tried to exploit this bug, and then not a bug, but it's a standard flaw. We tried to set up a rogue base station like an IMSI catcher, and then try to collect and try to ask the phone to send measurement report. So the phone was quickly sending its measurement reports without, even though like there was no any kind of authentication or security. So we tried this on different phones because it's a standard flaw. All the manufacturers like who are trying to implement the standard, so obviously they'll implement, are actually affected with this vulnerability. Then we found something called radio link failure report. The kind of functionality is similar between radio link failure reports and measurement reports. Like for example, like when you are going to when you are inside an in an elevator, like maybe sometimes like your call is dropped or you have like poor signal coverage. So this is some new feature that got introduced into LTE. So whenever there's a poor connection and there's a radio link failure, like you lost the connection, the phone would automatically create a report. And this report actually contains like all the information from nearby cell towers, and also like on which particular cell or base station this kind of poor coverage was happening, so that once the operator receives this kind of report, he can actually use it to troubleshoot like signal coverage issues or improve the coverage. And I mean, ultimately the purpose is to like make the network much better in terms of performance. According to the standard, we see that it's kind of like mandatory to have security for this kind of reports. But we found that most of the vendors are not really implementing security for we don't know like why they didn't implement security for this kind of messages. There was no reason for that. And we tried to exploit this. So we could actually receive reports from all the phones and try to use this information. So after this, we moved one step ahead. We wanted to see like if it's possible, okay, these reports can actually carry your GPS, like irrespective of your enabling or disabling in your Android or your iOS, because like the baseband which is sitting below or the master of your phone has more access to the GPS chip compared to your Android or iOS. So we thought that, okay, maybe we can send a GPS request to the phone and then try to get back a GPS coordinate from the phone without actually using any kind of security or authentication. So this is like I'm on LTE, and then I'm an attacker, and I don't have any kind of keys, and I can send and I can establish a base station and try to send a GPS request to the phone over the air, and I actually receive the GPS coordinate. LTE. So all the IP data messages that are being sent from your phone are not integrity protected. So which means that even if a man in the middle actually modifies this message, there is no mechanism to actually verify by the network. It was not defined in the standards, thinking that, okay, most of in LTE, like people are mostly using apps. And I think it's the responsibility of the apps to actually consider about data modification. But like these guys thought, okay, so this is the thing. Let's see if we can crack the DNS part. So whenever your phone is accessing a web page, obviously it would send a DNS request, and usually there is certain kind of, and these DNS are like HTTP. So even though if a packet is like encrypted and it's HTTP and it's DNS, so if you can observe a kind of pattern between all these DNS received packets, it's possible to modify certain bits in that so that you can actually divert the DNS request to a fake DNS server. Like I said, there is no verification of, or like there is no protection against man-in-the-middle attacks, only for the user data, but the control plane data is actually protected. So all the IP traffic can actually be hijacked by this kind of attack. So these are some of the issues related to privacy. Then moving on to availability, it's nothing but like denial of service. We know that most of the stingrays, they actually operate based on the principle that they can downgrade from 4G to 2G. Like, since most of the attacks are somehow difficult on LTE, it's possible that you bring you jam 4G network, and then you bring, so obviously the user would move to 3G or 2G network, making the attacks more simple. So we tried like three different attacks, and the last one is something that's actually targeting the network, not targeting the phones. Like we were bored trying so many attacks on the phones, and we wanted to shift the focus. So we thought, okay, network, why not target the network instead of phones? Because like targeting a network is more challenging, but the impact is even more when you're targeting a group of phones. So the first attack we tried was like based on a certain message. So there's something called a tracking area update reject message in the standards defined. So if you can actually send this message to the phone with a particular code, something like LTE and non-LTE services not allowed. So when you send this message to the phone, what the phone does is like it immediately enters into emergency mode. So, and it doesn't regain normal service until you restart the phone, or in some cases, like until you remove the SIM card and then reinsert it again. So this is kind of like a denial of like persistent DOS, because like the user doesn't really know that, okay, this kind of message transaction has been happened between the phone and the network. So it's kind of like silent, and it requires reboot of the phone to get back normal service. Then there's the second one, like downgrading the user from 4G to 2G. So there are like some special messages called RRC release. I'm not sure if this is clear, but there's something called RRC release where you can actually specify a particular frequency of 2G network, and you can actually kick the phone from a 4G network to a 2G network. And once the phone is on 2G, I think like we can do lots of stuff, like we can actually bypass encryption and don't do authentication. And then you have like plain text exchange traffic between the phone and the network. So it's like taking down everything. maybe sometimes user might notice that, okay, why I'm not getting the 4G service, why my phone is sitting on 2G. So maybe if he's like aware of such things, but like, okay, he cannot detect these things on the phone. Then the third one is like poisoning the BTS. So like I showed before, they were like, the phones are sending something like measurement reports and radio link failure reports. So these reports are actually collected from the phones and are accumulated in the network. So whenever there's a failure, and then the phone tries to send a report, and the base station or the whole network try to accumulate and save these reports and later use it for like troubleshooting network coverage issues. So let's say on a particular base station, if it's really performing bad, like if it's accumulating maybe 1,000 reports per day, which is somewhat like a severe issue, because like the performance, like the KPIs are something like the performance indicators are something like it should be 96%, or some vendor documents show that it should have a performance of like 97%, which means that you can drop maybe 10 or 15 calls per day, but that's too much. But for some operators, like it could be different depending on the place where they install their base station. So what we tried is like, we tried to create such radio link failure situation. We try to create such scenario to the phone and make the phone experience radio link failure, and make the phones to send thousands of such reports to the network, and the network actually blindly trust these reports and try to use it to control the settings. So in some documents, like some base stations we played. So if the phone is like, if the performance is dropping below 96%, they would actually blacklist that particular base station, which means that they won't allow any kind of handovers to that particular base station. Or in worst cases, like they could really turn off that base station and try to maybe install a different one, or send a service guy or somebody like to repair that base station. This is something we did against some protocols called self-organizing networks. I don't know if you are interested, you can actually Google about self-organizing networks and some attacks on that. Okay, these are some of the setup we use. Mostly since I'm doing an academic research, like we have to be a bit more open. So we have to use something that's available in the open source area, so that like, for example, like we use softwares like Open LTE and SRS LTE to demonstrate like proof of concept attack. Because like the problem with operating such devices is like, it's illegal to operate an IMSI catcher unless you have a legalized permission, or you purchased a particular frequency to operate in that region. This is some of the man-in-the-middle setups, and then we try to keep the cost of the attack low. I was doing training, and then people were asking me like, can you use like Lime SDR, because a device like USRP costs a lot. So the Lime SDR is something that's really cheap, like maybe $200 or something. But this one comes around $1,200. So there's a huge cost difference. But with the huge cost difference also comes the capability. So with this, you can actually do more compared to this one. The catches like prevailing in LTE, like why are they still existing? So basically, like I can get back to two reasons why, because the thing is like the phone always wants to connect to a strong tower. So whenever it's like, even though if you're not using your phone is constantly listening to so many cell phone towers nearby, and just keep observing like, okay, which one is the strongest one, and then maybe I can connect to it, or switch to other one. So if you can operate one such base station with a strong power, you can actually attract so many phones. This is like trying to attract the phone. Then after this, like, okay, you can ask me like, okay, there is something called mutual authentication in 3G and 4G. There are like so many security algorithms, or like they are using AES, and they're using so much, but why again, like we still have these security attacks, or like privacy, or something that affecting the denial of service. The thing is like, in the standards and implementations, there are like certain messages that could be actually used even though if there is no authentication and no security. So in that case, an attacker like who has knowledge of these protocols and who has knowledge of some implementation and access to such devices can really perform such attacks and really cause a huge impact. So regarding the status, so we try to, like, before going public or like before trying to inform so many authorities or like vendor, we try to play with so many devices. I mean, luckily, like we don't have to deal with thousands of companies. Like, it's good that we deal with some of them, and then you do good. So at least some of the attacks we tested, like they're applicable to most of the networks worldwide. Whenever like we travel to conference, like we try to collect traces from different networks. For example, like let's take maybe every country has like at least 3 operators or sometimes like only 2. So along with that, like not recently, but like the baseband vendors, they started to have something called like the vulnerability disclosure programs, like which are already existing in Android or iOS like for so many years. So we try to inform them about these bugs and try to discuss like what are the practical implications of this. And when it comes to a standard implementation, or like when it comes to the standard flaw, it takes a lot of effort to convince somebody from the standard that this is really a problem, and if you don't fix it, like there are a lot of impacts which might arrive. Then we have some friendly organization called GSMA. It's nothing but an alliance of so many operators worldwide. So they try to help us and distribute our work so that you receive comments or like cross questions from different operators. Like sometimes they are not agreeing what you're saying. So when you try to convince them and then try to answer them, so you can really create a huge impact going through this kind of disclosure programs. And 3GPP, the standard body, recently they started to have some kind of vulnerability disclosure program, so which could also be interesting to use if you're doing some kind of cellular security research. Okay, what's the status now? Like, what's the thing now? Like with the new phones, like we have iPhone X or like some new phones. Like, can we consider that like they are secure? Yes, at least iPhones, which we usually test, are somehow taking the privacy and the availability issues seriously. So they try to contact us and then like see what can be done to actually fix. Or sometimes like some flaws are not really, like they cannot be really fixed unless you do major changes. So maybe there could be a workaround to actually fix those issues. Like I said, like the IMEI, maybe if you buy a phone from 2018, it's not possible to receive the IMEI of a particular phone unless you have proper authentication and then security. I'm talking about LTE, but these attacks are still possible on 2G. But anyway, it's old and it's already like so much of research there, so we are not interested in that. Then coming to user data integrity protection, which I was talking about, DNS hijacking. This issue is actually fixed in 5G, and it's really difficult to fix in 4G. So you can expect like all the user plane data is integrity protected in 5G. So this is a major change in 5G. Okay, regarding the availability, like I said, the attacker, like whenever he tries to send a message to create a DOS on the phone, like the user has to manually restart the phone, but there's a workaround that there's a timer which actually allows the phone to reconnect to the network whenever the phone receives such a message. Because this is also important for low power IoT devices, because like sometimes you place the IoT devices somewhere far away and cannot be manually like connected or like operated. So for such devices, it's really important that there should be some kind of timer to auto reconnect to the network. Then for the redirection, like bringing a user from 4G to 2G, you actually need some kind of authentication message or like authentication procedures to do such attack actually. And there's a nice study, like at least finally the 3GPP is actually considering to actually deal the problem of fake base stations. This problem has been in 2G, 3G and 4G, and I think it will also be in 5G. So there is some nice work which is going on in 3GPP standards, like about what are the proper solutions to actually deal with these fake base stations. I mean, nothing is finalized yet, but it's a study going on, and they consider different solutions and which one is best. So according to that, they proceed. Maybe like you might think like, okay, if I'm a user, like I'm a normal phone user, and then I want to protect from this kind of privacy attacks or like availability attacks. There are some applications like Android apps, which could be installed on the phone, and then they try to continuously monitor like such attacks. But somewhere in 2017, we actually tested all of the applications. I don't know if you're familiar with the Snoop Snitch. It's actually a tool from SR Labs. And some other applications like Darshak, or even there are Android IMSI catcher detector, something like this. But we tried to test these applications by actually operating IMSI catchers, and most of the applications really fail in detecting. Simple reason is like they are open source and they're free. So there's not much research put into that. We also tested some commercial applications, like for example, there's a company called GSMK. They build some military apps, and we tried to test IMSI catchers on their IMSI catcher detectors. But there are still so many issues that are actually not solved in the place of IMSI catcher detectors. We're actually coming up with a new tool that can actually help normal phone users like to actually detect attacks on their 4G phones, because there is no detection yet available for 4G phones. Like I said, okay, this is some reference to the fake base station work that's been going on in 3GPP. Maybe if you're interested, you can just take a look on that. Or okay, what's more in 5G? Like, is 5G going to solve all the problems, or is just a hype in the market? Okay, at least your SIM identity is protected, your phone identity is protected, and your user plane data is protected. So at least there is certain level of protection is being considered from rogue base stations. But still the problem is not yet solved, and there's actually a lot to do from the baseband vendor's perspective. Like, you could use a proprietary solution and put it in your baseband so that that's actually detecting all the attacks. But still, I would say like there is a lot of scope and work still pending in that section. Okay, the takeaways is like IMSI catchers will still exist in 5G, but maybe they won't be able to catch the IMSI, but still they'll be able to do some other attacks, like some other new attacks or new ways. So we still have to wait and see, because like we may not have a real 5G network until 2021, or in practically, like I would say it will take like 2022 to have a 5G network like as deployed as an LTE network, or even more. And apart from that, like we talk about like IoT these days very, very often. The cool thing is like nowadays, like IoT devices are being integrated into the mobile network. So you can actually control them through mobile network. And when you are integrating such devices into the mobile network, like you really have to be careful in terms of implementing your applications on the IoT devices. So you cannot completely or blindly depend on mobile network security and then just neglect the application level security. I can say like, at least the kind of testing we do, I can say like a phone that's released in 2019 is somehow safe from most of the attacks actually mentioned in this talk. Yeah, so that's the end of the talk. And then if you have questions, please. Okay, so let's talk about like you're making a, let's like you're browsing the web page, like so there's a man in the middle who's, yeah, I mean that's what, like you operate a base station. Like a man in the middle is nothing but it's operating a base station plus a phone. So like maybe if you see this one, like it's operating a base station on one side, and it's also operating a phone on the other side. So whatever, this is the victim phone. So it comes to this one, and then through this, it actually passes on to the network. No, we're not going that way. But so most of the attacks we are doing are actually on the air interface. That's the main interesting point for me. So yeah. Okay, I would go with USRP, even though if it's expensive. There could be like two reasons. It's stable compared to Blade RF and other devices, and some of the open source software which are available for research or on the internet, like they mostly are using USRP. So when you buy a Blade RF and then you're looking for the software and you're actually missing the driver, so you have to put additional effort to integrate the driver into the software and then use the application. So why do you want to take this extra effort, sir?
So guys, any other question? So when we do the problem of finding low VDS, the MSCs we have to cover the network, and they run a program to check all the authenticated authenticated VDS running around the area.
Actually, the base station which an attacker is operating is never connected to the real network.
Yeah, so the radio frequency of the original VDS would be fast, right?
Yeah.
So if all the original VDSs are connected to each other and they recognize themselves, so how does that?
So this is a wireless medium. So everybody who has an antenna has the right to transmit. So, and somebody knowing the frequency can actually transmit. So there's no way unless you have proper detection ways. For example, jamming could be detected. Jamming is nothing but some kind of noisy signal that could be detected. But if you're operating in a proper LTE signal, which is a legitimate signal, so even though if the network operator is listening to this signal, he might end up thinking that this is a normal signal and he can just avoid it. IMSI application.
How do they have access to baseband messages? How they detect IMSI catches?
They have access to the diagnostic logs. So all the messages coming from, so to install such applications, you need a rooted phone. Or some phones like which come with this diag access. So they continuously monitor reading these messages. So based on this, for example, like if they receive something like paging with IMSI, this is something not very common in the normal network. This is something malicious network. So this is one way of detecting. But still, because like the whole baseband is a huge state machine and you cannot just detect based on a few parameters. So you have to consider a lot to actually properly detect an IMSI catcher, or else like you end up giving false positives, and which will actually annoy the user. So thank you.